Hello, listeners. Welcome to Inside TechComm with your host, Zahra Mutabana. In Season 3, we shift our focus to shed light on why technical communication is a core business asset. In this regard, we will speak with guests who are our stakeholders, such as product managers, marketing professionals, UX designers, QA, and customer support, who engage with writers to create a seamless experience for the customer and meet business goals together. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Inside TechComm show. We are kicking off Season 3 with our special guest, Kim Campbell, who is from academia. Kim is the professor and director of corporate relations at the University of North Texas. My goal in interviewing Kim is to understand the challenges that one faces in academia and how we, the professionals, can collaborate to create a business win for our field. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks for having me, Zora.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Tell us about yourself, Kim.
Well, I'm 61, so that question could take me a while to answer, but I'm going to try to focus on the most important things in terms of what your listeners might find interesting related to TechComm. So I have a lifelong passion for words, especially written words. I got an undergraduate degree in English linguistics. And in 1987, I found myself in a graduate degree program at LSU working on a PhD in linguistics and writing. And I took at the same time a part-time gig as a technical editor working for the vets who were doing research over in the vet school. At the same time, my mentor told me PhDs are all about research. We don't know yet whether you're going to be successful at that. If you're not, the good news is you'll be able to get a job as a tech writer or editor. And I thought, okay, this is a win-win. I feel really good about this. Because nobody starts a PhD, I don't think, knowing that they're going to succeed. Mm-hmm. It is all about research. So I thought I knew that I could teach and I could do other things, but I wasn't sure about the research. So I became interested in TechComm partly because I was doing that job and partly because I was in a department that actually had some graduate courses in tech writing. So I took all those courses. I eventually taught both business and tech writing to undergrad students. And I figured out, I like this so much. This is what I'm going to really concentrate my career in. What's unique, I think, is that my path was not accidental, really, or at least less accidental than for many folks in the field.
Glad you said that because it sounds very intentional.
It honestly was. Once I found, I love linguistics, but I knew that I wanted to be able to do something applied. I like to believe that what I teach and research has real impact in the world. Right. And I found that TechComm was the perfect fit for me.
First of all, Kim, thank you for that awesome introduction. And you started with, I'm 61, and I would have not known that. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yes. So let's get that out of the way. Now, I have a lot of insecurities hearing that you look fantastic, but you have such an amazing background. You know, you've been teaching and I've kind of gotten to know you through STC and you've done a lot. I see your postings on LinkedIn. You're trying to promote the field. Every other guest interview that I've had, I have asked my guests about their journey. This episode, we're going to pivot a little bit. And as much as I would love to know about yourself, you and I talked about how we want to promote this field.
If I give you a quick rundown of the places that I've worked over the years, I think that it's less interesting about the specific places, but I think that it helps listeners get a feel for where academics that do TechComm.
I think it's important. Yes, please do.
Okay, so my first job as a professor was in an English department at Auburn University. I stayed there for 2 years. Then I moved on to a TechComm division at something that's called the Air Force Institute of Technology, which is a postgraduate school for Air Force officers, DoD civilians, sometimes international officers. Mm-hmm. I spent 5 years there. Then I spent 19 years as a professor in a management and marketing department in a business school at the University of Alabama. And then the last 5 years, I've been in one of the very few tech comm academic departments in the world at the University of North Texas. So despite the names of all those different colleges, institutions, departments, I've been teaching and researching tech comm pretty much the same way for 30 years. So we, in academe, we truly do not have a single home in the same way that accounting does.
Which other universities have a department of technical communications? And in your opinion, are those going away? Would you like to share something about that?
Absolutely. I have strong opinions about this. So I'm just going to warn the listeners now. My disclaimer, the fact that there are so few tech comm focused departments, there are literally hundreds of undergraduate degrees in the US offered in tech writing. Literally hundreds, maybe 400 different institutions have tech writing degrees at the undergraduate level. And there are lots. There was an article about 10 years ago by some of my colleagues in which they looked at the different disciplinary homes of those degree programs. And basically they're spread out primarily in English departments. Some are in engineering and some are in odd places like colleges of agriculture. We're everywhere is what I'm trying to say. There was one in a journalism school, whatever. We're everywhere. In my opinion, the field has not the degree programs have flourished because of the interest in education that is more directly relevant to careers. The field has not flourished so much from being housed in humanities departments because they're not very good at thinking about professional careers. That's not what they do. I don't have anything I love literature. However, being good at analyzing literature does not directly relate, not just being a tech writer, but being a leader of tech comm in an organization made up of engineers or developers or scientists or whatever. So I would say that it's unfortunate we've not grown more than we have. That's all related to the politics of universities, which is not something we really want to talk about.
Right. Kim, I'm so delighted that you brought up this aspect of the field because, again, I personally graduated in with a master's in technical communications, technical and professional writing. And it was housed in the Department of English. And like you said, one of the big challenges that I personally felt was funding. Again, when you talk about rhetoric, how do you apply that in the real world? Even today, sometimes I question, why did I study this? And how does that apply to my field? I still question that.
I think with very few, well, and it's true of everyone. I'll say I know one of the things you're interested in is what kind of degrees we offer in Tech Comm at UNT. Mm-hmm. So we have a whole slew of degrees in Tech Comm. So we have an undergraduate BA, we have an undergraduate BS, we have certificates at the undergraduate level and a minor, we have a master's degree, and we have certificates at the graduate level. We don't have PhD level students in Tech Comm, which is unfortunate because I think that who we are would do the field good if we were producing PhDs that went elsewhere, but PhDs are expensive programs and it's not a time to ask your university to come up with new PhD programs. So when I think about, that's a long-winded way of saying students who come out of our degree programs are, I believe, far better prepared for the realities of the corporate world or the white collar world or the profession that they're going to practice. Nevertheless, there's so much to know, and technology is so important in our careers that it changes constantly. People have to be okay with being lifelong learners. They cannot thrive at all. In fact, really, I don't even think they can survive without being lifelong learners in tech comm. So even though I think we do for example, one of the things we do with our undergraduates is we instituted a new class a few years ago that's called The Profession of Tech Comm. And we use a wonderful book from XML Press, and we have industry guests come in every week. We have students thrown into teams in which they have to do things they have no idea how to do, because this is the beginning of their degree program, not the end. And so we throw them in, redo a website for someone, or we throw them into repurposing a white paper into a slide deck for someone, or really pretty hard things. We don't expect them to do a great job on the products, but we expect them to come out of that class with some understanding of how important teamwork, collaboration, and all the things that go into it, how important that is. Asking questions, taking responsibility for what you know and what you don't know. So really the lessons in that course they're much more psychological.
Yes, and I think the soft skills, that the emotional quotient, as I think, the EQ that is required is very important. And those are the things that you're touching upon. And I would like to share that I've come to some of the showcases at UNT, and I've been impressed, and I'm thinking, I wish I were in their place. I wish I could go back to school and learn this. Invaluable.
I agree. Like every kind of parent, I guess, we're just happy that we can provide what we wish we had to our students.
I can, vouch for that. The department is doing a fantastic job in that area. So thank you for preparing the next gen of tech writers, because I'm so passionate about this field. But coming back, I can sing songs of praises about this field that has given so much to me. But you are the director of corporate relations and a professor, of course. What's the objective of this partnership with the corporate world, Kim?
So it's multifaceted. I suppose the easiest thing for listeners to understand is that there is definitely a focus on students. So we want as many corporate partners as possible to be involved in our degree programs. So that means things like having people who will be guest speakers in courses or do workshops, people who will be mentors to students, people who will help students find internships and jobs or offer them, let us know about them. We do get called a lot. Once people find us, they don't all know about us, unfortunately, but once they find us, they're usually on the phone every time they have an opening, because there are relatively few programs that prepare students in the way that we do. We also are interested in money from corporate sponsors, because they do things like offer scholarships to students. We were lucky enough to have the people at PayPal make a gift to the department last year. We actually used that for marketing purposes, because we all know in the field that too few people know about this path. Those are the most important reasons why we want corporate interaction, regular, like I'm a strong believer in community, and the community cannot be made up only of faculty and students, and it also can't be made up only of employers and tech comm pros. It's silly that we don't have not silly, it's counterproductive for us not to have a community where we're sharing information. So it's also really important to us from a faculty perspective, which might be something the listeners aren't thinking about, but we care deeply that we're preparing students for the workplace they're going to enter in a couple of years, not the one that was around when we did whatever 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so the only way I know of to be current is for us to be talking to people who are doing the job, right? So we need both access to what's happening in the world. And I have to say, as a researcher, one of the most frustrating things for all of us is many of us want to do relevant research for industry, but access to data is incredibly hard for us to get. So we need corporate partners to help let us in to study what's happening in their organizations.
I'm a practitioner, and I was thinking that there is definitely a disconnect. That's my personal opinion. And you're sort of, validating that opinion of mine. It is anecdotal,
definitely.
but and we need to build bridges. And
agreed.
The bridges that you're trying to build is what will set us up for success. And
absolutely,
sort of
all of us, the whole community. Absolutely.
So, Kim, we've been talking about how we can build bridges and how we can take this profession forward. Keeping with that same notion, I want to ask you talked about how this helps us as a community. One of the things that you mentioned was it's hard to find data. What would you like to happen so that you can find data? Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, and it's not the sexiest thing to bring up with most corporate partners. Mm-hmm. So it's not usually the first thing we talk about. We talk about students first because most people are on board with students. It's harder to get people. So first of all, let me say there's a lot of fear about letting some external person inside your workplace. So the kind of data that we would like, it varies depending on which of us is doing the research and what the research questions are. But for example, we have a researcher who is interested in how tech writers in software companies interact in Scrum. Mm-hmm. And what kind of influence they have, what kind of influence it has on them and their work. She has fought really hard to get access to software development companies. I have another partner. So we also, some of us would like to just get our hands on content. And it can be much content is on the web, but that's not always the content we're looking for. So sometimes we want to look behind the scenes.
What sort of content? I want to dive into the specifics.
Sure. So for example, much of my research has dealt with, because I'm a linguist, with style and with editing. And so one of the things that is really lacking is some understanding of how review and revision actually takes place. Mm-hmm. So we try to prepare students for what's going to happen, and we hear people talk about it, but that's not the same thing as watching or collecting the data that actually is involved, the conversations, the drafts, who all is involved, what do they say? That kind of data is incredibly powerful because it gives us you think about in your own practice, like that's where the work happens.
Yes.
Right? That's those interactions with those SMEs or product managers or whoever it happens to be, or maybe your supervisor or however it is you're integrated into the technical product development, right? However that happens, and it happens differently. That's part of the frustration for us too, is even if we got in one organization and we're able to study all of this and it would be a case study, right? So it would be a N of one.
Right.
That organization, that particular product over some amount of time with that limited number of people, but it might be totally different, even in the same industry, but in another company, because they may be organized differently. So there are just the number of things we don't know is astounding.
Got it. And I think I've worked with some really young writers, and now it's sort of, you're shining a light on why sometimes they may struggle because there is it's not an established process. And we are trying to find our seat at the table. And that's another goal of mine through this podcast, is for writers to be empowered.
Absolutely. So one of my, I suppose, most successful lines of research has been in leadership. And I am particularly interested because of our Comm students and because of, I don't know how real the perception, I know what the perception is. The perception is that they're all introverted. They all just want to sit in a cubicle, do their own thing, have everybody leave them alone. They don't have, if they have opinions, they don't want to tell anybody what they are. But I just don't believe that. I've met our students. I don't think that's all of them. I think some of them want to be leaders. When I was listening to Agnes's visit with you,
Yes.
One of the things that made total sense to me was that she didn't start out as a tech writer. She thought she had a voice from the beginning, right?
Yes.
And she has used it to her benefit and to the organization's benefit, and honestly, to the community's benefit.
What's the community? Yes.
Right? So there are a couple of us who are really interested in finding ways. Another thing that I'm really interested in was brought up by Steve Wiseman, who was your guest a couple of episodes ago. And he's talking about how TechComm basically should or could be leading all this digitalization that's going on because of content strategy. Like, we've been doing this. I had an interview. I teach content strategy at the grad level, and I had several expert content strategists come in and visit with my students. One was Rahel Ann Bailey. And one of the things Rahel said was, TechComm should have the seat at this table. We're the ones who for 20 years have been figuring out how to produce content efficiently and deliver it in multiple ways. And like, we're the experts in this. And yet content strategy is co-opted by marketing and becomes something very different. And they reinvent the wheel, which is not good. It's not good for us as a profession. And it's not good for the companies because they're losing out on the knowledge that's already inside their organization.
I'm so glad that this conversation is allowing these issues and these challenges to surface. As a practitioner, I have questioned these very same things. Why? Why is this happening? And I think you and I would agree that probably this requires a much more deeper dive. But
I agree totally, yes.
Right? As much as we are sort of just skimming the surface, I do want to bring these to the fore, that these are some real challenges that we as even practitioners face.
Yes, absolutely.
One, thank you for listening to my other episodes. I'm so touched for giving me, you've given me that opportunity. And yes, Agnes has done such a fantastic job. She talks about sponsors. You find sponsors who can speak for you. And Steve Wiseman, who talks about content strategy. All true things. One, I think one of the challenges that I have faced as a writer is I did not find the worth in my profession. And I think that's probably because where I was taught, it's not the fault of the degree program, but we are so, we talked about being part of the Department of English. There is no focus on the business side. And I think no matter where this program is housed, we need to focus on how do we create business value for ourselves.
Absolutely. So my grad students who take my content strategy course they have no idea what to expect, I don't think, but then they're totally blown away because the first few weeks are all about content equals asset. So why do we want to focus and strategize about content? Because it's worth something to the organization in which you work. And so this really kind of blows their mind. This is not something we do what we can to integrate some lessons about every business related thing, but content strategy is the one course where how can you talk about content strategy without talking about business? Like, obviously it's about business. That's what it is. And every undergraduate business student studies strategy.
Yes. And I think there needs to be more collaboration, that interdepartmental collaboration as well. TechComm needs to step out of its shell and collaborate. Agreed. So I think that also needs to happen. And that probably, again, will happen eventually as the community builds, because there is that communication and that dialogue happening. We've touched upon all these interesting facets, challenges, but there are successes too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And would you like to share about that?
Okay, so I'll just be selfish first. I was going to talk about students because that's obvious, but my own career is an absolute slam dunk. This opened every door for me. I've had a wonderful career. I've had a tenured position at many universities. I've made a decent living. I've gotten a chance to do work that I find meaningful. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of opportunity in academia for people with TechComm chops. But the first thing I thought of course, is students. So one of my jobs as a faculty member is to supervise internships that are taken for academic credit. Our undergraduates are not required to do an internship, but some do. We try to encourage every single one. I visit that professionalization course every semester and say, come talk to me, or follow me on LinkedIn. I'm sending out zillions of opportunities, literally zillions.
I see that.
Several a day. I mean, because there are lots of opportunities out there. Even during this pandemic, I really did not see a terrible slowdown. Of course, the jobs went remote, but honestly, many tech writers have worked remotely for years. So it's not that odd for them to take that kind of I see success because I see those students in those internships. One of the things that we require them to do is create a video, that 10, 15 minute long video about their getting the job. What do they do at the job? Show us some work products, talk about what courses helped you, what do you wish you had known. So it's mostly valuable to the faculty members, to be honest, because that's our way of validating whether we're heading in the right, are we preparing students in the right way for the jobs that they're going to get. But it also helps other students see what's possible, because they can watch those. It's one thing when the parent tells you something. It's one thing when the teacher tells you something. It's something else when the peer tells you something. Yeah. So when students watch these videos of former students, people just like them, same degree program, same courses, same whatever, doing incredible stuff and making even our interns, they make good money, as they should. And I tell them all the time, you should not be working for free unless this is just some passion of yours. There's no way you should be working for free. Let me tell you the data on what let me tell you the data on what students have been earning, because I ask, because that's part of that value, right? I want you to recognize how valuable you are to industry. So what I didn't finish, so we do have undergraduates, our MA program, we require them to do an internship. And it's one of the reasons why we have 100% placement, because
awesome.
That internship is super important.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And it's so good to hear that students step out into the real world and then find that success. And
absolutely.
We as a community want to make sure that our students find the success that they deserve, like you said.
Absolutely.
And that they find their value in this field. And it's not just students finding value, but businesses that are missing out if you're not hiring the right talent.
That's exactly right. And to be honest with you, almost every, of course, I don't have data on this. I can't imagine that our students don't rise to the top of any pool of applicants unless they've applied for something that's clearly, they want. So I could get on this rant for a minute. There are no jobs listed for entry-level people with less than 3 or 5 years of experience, which is totally ridiculous. Why would anyone have 3 or 5 years of experience and want an entry-level job? So I just tell students to ignore that. If it says 8, okay, it's not for you. If it says senior, probably not for you.
Not for you.
But really, anything else, apply. What do you got to lose?
Yes. And Kim, I read about this just a few days ago. I think a lot of graduates are entering the real world, and the same challenge. If you're asking for experience, how is this an entry level? And I actually saw an ad on LinkedIn, I believe, 8 years, and it was entry level. And I don't think it was for technical writing. So this seems to be across the field.
It's a trend.
It's a trend.
We try to coach students to understand that job ads are not necessarily written by the person who's going to hire you. And they're also job ads for unicorns. They're for individuals who don't exist. They've written this wish list of what they wish someone had, and they want to pay them $50,000 a year. Well, you're not going to get that. I'm sorry, that's not realistic. And so we try to coach students, but of course, part of it is youth, right? Part of it is we tend to attract a little more introverted, these are not the students that chose to go into sales, marketing as a major. They're a little more introverted, and they've really been taught from the beginning that their greatest skill, their word skill, their communication skill is not the most valuable, which is unfortunate. But if I could fix K through 12, I would, but I don't really know how.
I see. Okay. So you're saying that this is not just at the university level, but this is...
Oh, no, it's throughout. So if you think about the way, sorry, this is one of my, get on my preacher's cloak for a second.
As we said, we want to deep dive a little bit here.
All right. Well, one of my greatest disappointments in life, I actually started my PhD in a college of education because what I wanted was to use my linguistic expertise as a way to help young people learn to write. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to do. But I lasted about 6 weeks. Well, I mean, I finished the semester, but they were not interested in doing anything differently. They just wanted me to learn how to make poster boards, like whatever on the wall. And they wanted me to learn this is a PhD program. So I just said, okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to go back to where I came from, which was linguistics, and it all worked out. But the issue is the way that students are, you'll know this from your own experience, the way students learn to write, they only learn one genre that has one audience, and what they write has zero communication value because that's not what they don't write to communicate something. Mm-hmm. They write to display their knowledge to someone who already knows the answer. When in the rest of your life do you do that? Never. It's the total opposite of why you write for the rest of your life. You're the expert. Your job is to communicate what you know to someone who doesn't know it.
And that's such a different mindset. I mean, that requires a different thinking process, not the writing process, but the thinking process.
I'm not opposed to having kids learn how to do creative writing too. I think that's awesome. But alongside that, did you write many proposals while you were in school? Did you write poems? You wrote a lot of essays. Those are real helpful for nothing past the age of 21. So students don't know that they've only learned one genre for one audience. They think writing is that, right? And this is most of my job as a professor forever in teaching has been to unteach.
Oh my God.
Forget that. Just forget all of that stuff. Yes, that's good for this, but we're not doing that anymore, right? We're going to do something different. But it's a very big psychological leap for anyone to take, really. And I mean, honestly, I saw this not just with tech writers. I taught lots of business students too at the undergrad level. And it's exactly the same for them. They try and write up some marketing research report as an essay. It's like, well, no, that's not how it works. It's not a 5-paragraph thing with an intro that means nothing. And then finally you get to the bottom line at the end. Yes. No, that's not how the rest of the world wants you to think about.
So that's something that I think as curriculum planners, probably we need to start looking at how do we, probably at the university level, how do universities influence how the K-12 education is happening?
Unfortunately, it all goes back to the literature stranglehold on language education. Probably. So there isn't really any language education. There's a lot of literature education. Not every teacher, but
and I'm not experienced in that profession, so I'm going to kind of lean on you to shine light on that, which you are. If I may share this, when I started my master's in technical and professional writing, one of the few things that I had to do was a critical analysis, which, I mean, you're kind of trained to do, but I came from a background where critical analysis was not part of my education. And when my professor told me to do that, I said, what do you mean by that? And here I was in my 20s asking that question. Why? Because one of the things was I had to do an audience analysis, which I did not understand. So you're right about that. Personally, I have gone through that experience and I had to unlearn. So not only, I mean, as a professor, you have to unteach, but I had to unlearn, and it was very hard at that age.
It is psychologically, it is brutal, which is why I wish that it started to happen at a younger age during elementary. And in fact, when my son was in school, when he was young and in elementary school, I would go every year and do a workshop with the kids in which I made them bring in some piece of writing that their mom or dad or whoever had created at work. And then we would do an analysis of it. And we would talk about how's this different from the essay that you had to write, or how's this different from the poem, or how's this, and like really once you, it's called rhetorical awareness. So once you open their minds to the idea of there are multiple genres, just like music, like whatever, just like any performance, right? There's multiple genres. So once you open their eyes to that, I think that it's much easier if they're younger. It's much easier for them. Yeah, it's easier for them to understand. And I think it also helps them be more motivated, honestly, in English during school. Because not every kid wants to focus on literature. I'm not saying that we should stop teaching literature, but we should also be helping those kids for whom that's not the thing that lights them up.
Again, another thing, my oldest daughter, she was 14 at the time, and her school district offers a course in professional communications over the summer. And it's a requirement, but it's a requirement as part of her IB curriculum.
Great. So see, internationally, they get this way more than the US does. Way more.
I was going to flip that and say probably US gets that better because I had a grounding in literature. So I think this is an issue, again, anecdotal, but we all have to take a look across the board, globally, on how do we streamline and mainstream humanities as part of the curriculum and not just literature. We've talked about the successes and the challenges. Now, one of the things that I wanted to kind of touch upon was funding, being housed in an English department. What kind of help would you look for in that aspect?
Let me tell this by telling my own personal story, because I've worked in different kinds of institutions doing the same job, teaching and doing research. So I'll talk about, I spent a long time with business professors. So 19 years at the University of Alabama in the business school. And then the 5 years before that at the Air Force postgraduate school. My colleagues were business people who taught for the Air Force. I had summers off always with funding to do research, almost every single year. And I'm talking about more than I would have made teaching a class in the summer. We have beautiful facilities in business, which I really miss being back in arts and sciences. So the facilities themselves, obviously, is not the goal, but one of the things that I made a priority when I got to UNT's Tech Comm department was to do everything I could to make our floor not look like a dungeon from the 1920s. We're supposed to represent cutting edge industry stuff here. And so many of the faculty laughed at me, but I made sure we got everything painted. We got new furniture. We got chrome letters on the wall and lucite chairs and lamps and everything that would communicate like modern. And so facilities themselves don't matter, but it does matter in terms of how it makes you, the faculty, even the most reticent folks came to me afterward and said, it does actually feel different teaching in a room that's not a trash dump, carpet that's been there for 20 years and dingy gray walls. And so anyway, so part of the funding deal is your physical surroundings. It's time off from teaching because, of course, academics work 9-month years, right? So you have a 9-month job, 3 months off. So many people think, I don't know what people in general think about what we're paid, but you can make a lot more money working a 9-month job in industry than you can a 9-month job or even a 12-month job in academe. So money's a deal. Most of our professors choose to teach in the summer because it's a way to earn extra money. But I wouldn't say it's the best use of their time. I think they would have more influence if they concentrated on making connections, collecting data from industry, talking to people in industry. So that's another thing. Conferences and professional organizations are very expensive from an academic point of view. And we have, 20 of them. There is nothing cohesive about our community. Part of that is, and I don't even mean just academics. I mean, so at one time or another, I have been a member of the IEEE Professional Communication Group. In fact, I was their editor of their research journal for more than 10 years. So I was very active with them. ACM, the other big engineering group, ACM has their own SIGDoc. Then there's STC, of course, which is the one main, but very few practitioners, very few academics belong because it's expensive. And there aren't very many academics there. ATTW, which is the Association of Teachers of Technical Writing, which is definitely an English department kind of affiliated with the National Council of Teachers of English. Yeah, I could go on and on. There's a million of these things. They all cost money to belong to. CPTSC, I could go on. They all cost money to belong to. There's no core, for a lack of a better, there isn't one place. So even in communication studies, which is very diverse in terms of the kind of research and the kinds of courses and the kinds of degrees, they have the National Communication Association. NCA is huge. Everybody belongs to NCA.
And what is NCA?
National Communication Association. It's only academics. There's no practitioners. So one of the strength of our field is our many different perspectives. It's also one of our weaknesses. Money for, and not just memberships, but industry conferences are way beyond the scope of anything most faculty in TechComm are going to be able to afford. Way beyond. Yeah, far beyond. So I'm not even thinking about the summit. I'm thinking about LavaCon and whatever, Confab and, the big industry,
yes.
Where there's no way. An academic, I increased our funding when I came as chair so that everybody got $2,000 a year for professional development. That doesn't go too far. That's pretty good. Most TechComm faculty, I think, probably get less than that. Business schools get a lot.
So tell me, one of the reasons that, we are kind of cost is a deterrent. And then sponsorship is also, I gather, is a challenge.
Yes.
So with all that, would it help if these organizations, if they either offered some concessions to academics, because we have to have that give and take. Otherwise,
it seems really important to me. And STC, they do have a lower membership rate. They do have an education rate, but I can tell you their education rate is way beyond what we pay for an academic conference. So it's just the two industries are very different in terms of what kind of money you have for what. Our money all goes to students, basically. It all goes to teaching related things.
Got it.
Research is, if you can compete for federal funds, which is very difficult for us to do. We do have one faculty member in our department who had an NSF grant, but it's very hard to get your own funding. One of the things that we've done with, for example, Big Design in Dallas is they have given us some student tickets sometimes so that the students, I've taken students down to Dallas to do the conference. And it's so eye-opening these are undergrads. It's so eye-opening for them to go to even one session. Right.
So may I ask you this question, Kim? I'm I'm actively involved with the local chapter. And I know that the STC Summit is looking for volunteers, student volunteers. And my chapter has done everything to spread the word about it. In your opinion, have students taken advantage of this, especially given that it is a virtual conference at this point in time? I've observed that whether we like it or not, I think we have to put it out there that some of the students that I have mentored have been introverted or they're not serious about the profession either. So as a practitioner, I'm trying to elevate the value of my profession, and I'm trying to see that the students benefit from it. So, and I'm just trying to bring a perspective from my end. And I think we need to help our students recognize that when you get these opportunities, you grab them. You got to step up and not to feel, like you said, not to feel scared about it. And you find your value. When you do, you will automatically give. And most students actually need that uplifting.
Could I agree with you 2000%? I don't want to be too negative, but perhaps my greatest disappointment in coming to my department, I came wide-eyed and ready to okay, we're gonna elevate. And I use the analogy of, or the metaphor, whatever, of, so the faculty and I and the staff prepare this incredible banquet, and we predicted what they'll like and what they won't. And we've, and we lay it in front of them, and they say, I'm not hungry. And it's okay, really? So I totally get the disappointment. Now, it is definitely not all students. We have some who are firecrackers, and they do take their development seriously, and they take advantage of every opportunity. And, it's everybody's dream to have that student, right? Because you lay it in front of them. And for someone, I think it's true of most faculty, sure, it's great to have smart kids, but if they're motivated, I don't really care how smart they are. I can help them overcome whatever challenges they have in terms of what they don't know, but I can't really give them the desire, the passion to do something they care about. So one of the things that I did a lot when I was an undergraduate teacher, and especially with business students who are perhaps the least engaged. Well, I don't know. They're probably equally unengaged in their education, but I would give them this little, I don't think of myself as a motivational person at all. It's just not how I'm wired. But I would give them this, remember Malcolm Gladwell, the book Outliers, where he talks about the 10,000 hour rule and how it takes so long. He talks about he talks about the Beatles, and the reasons they became so good is because they worked in a strip club in Germany and had to do 3 sets a day for year. Well, of course they got good because they practiced together constantly. And so, part of what I tell students is, so in order to get good at anything, you're going to have to put in a lot of time and effort.
What this conversation is sort of, again, shining a light on is the fact that, one, there is definitely that challenge in the K-12, right? So when students enter the field, let's say even intentionally considering this career path, they're not as motivated. Title problem, which we can fix overnight, and not definitely through this podcast.
Absolutely not. It's one of the reasons that we instituted that, what I kind of think of as the boot camp course at the undergraduate level, where they have to work incredibly hard, and it's not easy to do good work. And one of the reasons we chose to do that is because we really want to dissuade people who don't like this. If this is not for you, I get it. It doesn't need to be. But if you think you want to do this, you have to at least enjoy some parts of this.
This conversation actually brings something to my mind that Addison mentioned. He happens to go to all these hackathons.
Yes.
Right? And I learned so much from that conversation. I've never been to a hackathon because I'm questioning, even as a somebody who's been in this field a long time, what value can I bring? And Addison mentioned about his experience where he was assigned to a team and he had to communicate about the product, right? I want to end on a good note about our discussion, right? But as much as there are challenges, there are a lot of opportunities out there for our students, especially those who are motivated about the field. It is important. You got to be motivated. If you're not, then this field is probably not for you. But even if you're slightly invested, there are opportunities out there. One, of course, through internships, through pro bono opportunities, finding mentors. Addison talks about that. You reach out, you have the the access these days, and the practitioners will really turn you away because you will always find some help.
The local STC chapter has been awesome about offering our students mentorship, and a few have taken advantage
and they're actually
of it.
on a path to leadership, Kim, which I'm so proud personally to see them doing so well.
Yeah.
So I kind of, and then doing these hackathons and these boot camps that you talk about. And I think probably for academia, I'm not proposing a solution. It's just a thought of mine that based on what Addison said, I think there are these free hackathons that are happening. And I think our students, probably even STC as an organization, probably should consider to partner, right? And this is one way for us to.
Great idea. A great idea. I have always shared the fact those events are happening. I'm guessing that's how Addison knew about it. I don't know. But I've always shared those opportunities with our students so that they know that they're specifically, the organizers tell us, no, we want your students too.
Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I will say that one of the things that I loved most in listening to Addison's episode with you was you noticed his ability to think strategically, and that makes me really happy. I had Addison in several courses, so I know Addison, from a different perspective, right? So I'm really glad to see, because that's what it's a master's program. We want our students to be able to think strategically, so that he brought part of that with him, but I'm glad that we did our part to help him grow. And also to make them collaborate. They work in teams all the time, whether they like it or not. We give them we don't just assign teams, we actually do training about how to be a teammate, how to deal with conflict, how to be a leader, all those kinds of things. So that makes me feel really good. And the last thing I'll say is we require every master's student to have a web portfolio they have to defend to the faculty, instead of a thesis. So we don't have students do a thesis. We have them create a web portfolio. And I know that from talking to Addison, that one of the reasons that he got his first gig is because of the kind of projects that we have them work on while they're in our program, because they're real world projects. And so he could put those on his portfolio. So not only did he have a portfolio that had gone through many different faculty members' review, but he had things to put in it. And so I think that I really do believe that we do I don't know if there's anybody better. If there is, there aren't very many. Maybe there's 5 departments that have tech comm programs that are really world class. I know ours is one. That's why I came here 5 years ago. And I seeing the success of Addison and seeing him get involved in STC and take advantage of all the things that are available, it makes me happy about the future.
Kim, I want to first of all thank you for grooming such an amazing student. And definitely Addison is a great role model. And he's part of our chapter, but I've also gotten to know him offline. And I think he brings those leadership qualities. Some of it is definitely innate. He is a very motivated learner. And right. I think that is what, speaks to his ability to just, vibe so well. So thank you for grooming Addison personally and contributing so much to the field. This has been such a fantastic conversation, Kim.
I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Zora.
Me too. Thank you so very much.
Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, such as Apple, Google, or Spotify. For the latest on my show, follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or visit us at www.insidetechcomm.show. Catch you on another episode.